Then Moses said to the Israelites, "See, the Lord has chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and he has filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of artistic crafts. And he has given both him and Oholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, the ability to teach others. He has filled them with skill to do all kinds of work as engravers, designers, embroiderers in blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, and weavers, all of them skilled workers and designers. So Bezalel, Oholiab, and every skilled person to whom the Lord has given skill and ability to know how to carry out all the work of constructing the sanctuary are to do the work just as the Lord has commanded. Then Moses summoned Bezalel and Oholiab and every skilled person to whom the Lord has given ability and who was willing to come and do the work. They received from Moses all the offerings the Israelites had brought to carry out the work of constructing the sanctuary. And the people continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning. So all the skilled workers who were doing all the work on the sanctuary left what they were doing and said to Moses, "The people are bringing more than enough for doing the work the Lord has commanded to be done." Then Moses gave an order, and they sent this word throughout the camp: "No man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary." And so the people were restrained from bringing more, because what they already had was more than enough to do all the work.
Thank you, Phil, and well done for getting those names, foreign names, saying them. Anytime a preacher is coming out, there's this song that they sing at my sister's church that is in my mind. It's always, and I just thought I have to invite you using my sister's church's method. God has something to say. God has something to say. Listen, listen, pay attention, for God has something to say. Archie, please come and speak to us.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Becky. You're getting a call up to the worship team soon. Thank you. It's a wonderful song, God Has Something to Say. So thank you, and thank you, Oifi, for reading. As Becky said, there are one or two difficult names in there, so thank you. My name's Archie. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the minister in training here at Victoria Park Baptist Church, and it really is lovely to see you all here with us this morning. Thank you for making it out in the heat at the end of a heat wave. And if you need to come and just put your face in front of a fan here, you've had full permission to do that. We're in a sermon series at the moment called Exodus After the Exodus. And at the start of this sermon series, I said that we were taking a metaphorical tour bus. And I warned us that there might be some bumpy moments. And so I said, buckle up, put your seatbelt on. There might be some kind of potholes on the way and stuff like that. Well, having navigated a couple of weeks ago the golden calf moment, you're all still here. None of you have flown off the bus. We haven't had a puncture. And it appears that we're in the clear. Hooray. That's good. However, I'm now realizing that seeing as we're taking a bus tour through a desert, I probably also should have warned us about some of the heat. And like most buses that I've been on, it seems that the aircon aboard the Sinai Express is patchy at best. It's not quite as hot as the Central Line, but that's not really saying very much because the Central Line is sweltering. If you want to have like a free trip to a sauna, just go on the Central Line. Well, it's not actually free unless you've got to pay for the Central Line ticket. Anyway, all of that is to say that if you need to get up, if you need to stretch your legs, if you need to go and grab some water at the back or put your head in the fan, as I said, that's okay. You have full permission to do that. And we're not at the World Cup. So if you're taking a hydration break, we're not going to boo you. So you can do that full of confidence. You're safe here. I'll admit that alongside the bumpy ride and kind of the heat perhaps on some of the bus, you might also have been complaining about the lack of sightseeing that we've been doing, because basically all that we've really done is we've got a bus and we've gone to Mount Sinai and we've gone up the mountain a little bit, but we haven't really seen anything other than the mountain. And if you're paying for a sightseeing bus, you would like to perhaps see more than one sight. And you're in luck this morning, because we get to look at a very exciting construction project. Ooh. We're going to have a look at the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how of Israel's wilderness building project. So I hope you're all looking forward to that. And we will begin with the who. We can identify 3 sets of characters in the who is building. We've got God, we've got Bezalel, Aholiab, and all of the other workers. And then finally, we have everyone else. God is at the very center of this building project. There's a line in Psalm 127 which says that unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Some of you are nodding because you've heard it. These are words of God which are incredibly alive and active in this passage here. Unless God builds this construction project, the labourers build in vain. God's fingerprints are everywhere. God is the initiator of the project. He is the one who decides that this project has to begin. God is the architect and the principal designer of this project. He's the one who speaks 7 times with instructions for how the work is to be carried out. And just as a side note, I wonder if there's any other part of the Bible in which God speaks 7 times and something is created. I don't know. Genesis. Yeah, exactly. But that was a side note, and side note is now over. Something to think about. God is the one who hires all of the workers. God is the one who inspires the workers and anoints them with all of the skill, the ability, and the understanding that they will need for completing God's grand plans. And it is God who will be unloading the removal van and moving into the building once the project is finished. God designs, God instructs, God anoints, God appoints, and ultimately God indwells this building project. And if Bellagio was here, he'd be really glad that as the church building project manager, he'll be really glad that he doesn't have to do all of those things. Thankfully, we don't have those kinds of expectations for him. But we can probably agree that that's exactly as it should be. It's with God, it's through God, it's for God. But God himself is not the one who is wielding the hammer. He is not the one who is using the chisel. He's not the one who's weaving the fabrics, because there are human beings involved in the building as well. These human beings are predominantly the people with the slightly difficult names, Bezalel and Aholiab, and then many other willing workers who are also skilled but don't have names, unfortunately. We don't know very much about these people. Commentators think that the name Bezalel means in the shadow of God. And people think that Aholiab means Father is my tent. And both of these names seem kind of appropriate for what they might be building. But everything else that we know about these people, which, as I said, it isn't much, it comes from the texts that Oifi has read to us this morning. We see that Bezalel is filled with God's power, also known as God's Spirit, and he has been given skill by God and ability and understanding for every kind of artistic work. If you went to one of the hipster markets in Hackney and you're walking down London Fields markets, God has given Bezalel the skill for every single one of those stalls, which is quite a lot of skills. We also see that Aholiab is someone who's very gifted as well. We don't actually read a list of all of Aholiab's skills. Instead, what we read is that Aholiab, alongside Bezalel, has been gifted by God with the ability to teach his skills to others. And this is a crucially important point, I think, especially for people like us who live in an age of celebrity. Bezalel and Aholiab are incredibly and divinely gifted people. They could become celebrities in Israel. They could make grand designs. They could get great acclaim. But what do they do with their gifts? They share them. They don't use their gifts for themselves, nor do they keep their understanding a secret. They operate in such a way that God is glorified and the entire community benefits from their skills. They're not self-serving. They don't promote themselves. They don't get other people to see how good and great and talented they are. Instead, they work with the community. They share their gifts as well as using them so that the whole community grows and learns and participates in the work that God has called them to do. The effect that this has is that the entire community is elevated. The whole community benefits not just from their talent, from what they can make, from what they can craft, but also from learning how they can also develop in their own abilities, how they too can become skilled craftspeople. And thinking about it, I realized this was probably hard work for Bezalel and Aholiab. I was talking to John during the week who was having to train someone during his work, and he was saying that it's a little bit annoying because he could just do the same work by himself a bit faster. And when I was at Greg's, working at Greg's, teaching someone to clean the downstairs after a shift at the end, I hated having to do that with a trainee person, because even though there's two of you, you think, well, there's two of you, you can have 2 mops, 2 buckets, you can do it in half the time. Because you're showing them how to do it, it ended up taking twice as long. It was so frustrating. It shouldn't be hard to clean downstairs, but anyway, it doesn't matter. My Greg's days are behind me. It would have been hard work for Bezalel and Aholiab to teach their skills to others, because when you're teaching people things, you need to have patience. Sometimes people make mistakes. They don't learn as fast as we do. And in the short term, they might have been tempted to do all of the crafting themselves on behalf of the community, to do all of the work for the people without really involving the people. Instead, what they do is they teach their skills with others. They share their understanding with others. They work with the community. And this is so much better in the long term. It's a sustainable way of working where people are empowered and people are encouraged, where skills are shared, where understanding grows, and the whole community develops together. It's a way of working that I hope that we can model as a church. I hope that we can both use our gifts to the glory of God, and I hope that we can share our gifts with each other to build up the body of Christ, to equip each other for good works. For example, if you are really gifted at holding a phone into a microphone whilst the worship team is playing the music, do that. Hold that phone. I'm not that gifted person because I actually got a little bit of cramp in my hand as I was holding the microphone. So if you are that gifted person, please show me how to do that. Teach me. Share your skills. If you're compassionate and caring, as I know that so many of you are, then be compassionate. Take care of others. And encourage others in the way of mercy and pastoral care. Bring people alongside you and develop other people as you go. Are you a powerful and persistent prayer? Then pray and invite others to pray alongside you. Pray with other people. Encourage other people to also pray. Are you a gifted person in generosity and hospitality? Are you a gifted baker? Then please share all of your recipes with us, and even better, share the fruits of those recipes with us first. But be hospitable, be generous with the way that you welcome other people and help to show and develop and share that gift of hospitality and generosity in others. Are you gifted in leading others in worship? Then lead in worship and empower others to lead and worship well. The examples I could list, they could go on and on and on, and we've got so many gifts here, and they're brilliant, they're beautiful, and I love that some of these gifts, they're ordinary gifts. They're also extraordinary gifts. As we use them, as we share them together, we will be encouraged, we'll be built up into the likeness and the maturity of Christ. And the point of Bezalel and Aholiab and the fact that they share their gifts is this, that our gifts, our passions, our skills, they're not just for us. They are to equip, empower, and build up all of the people around us. And so speaking of the people around us, we can perhaps turn neatly to the final group of people in our building project, which is everyone. All of God's people are involved in God's construction work. They don't all wear high vis, they're not all skilled workers, they don't all learn from Bezalel and Aholiab, but all of the people are able to contribute in some way, whether it's bringing offerings, whether it's sharing resources, whether it's holding the community up in prayer. Everyone is involved in this building project. It's a whole body effort. And we will return to that whole body thing a little bit later in the sermon. But for now, you might have noticed that up to this point, I have been referring to a building project, a wilderness construction project, without ever quite mentioning what it is that they're building. And the tension is surely very, very high. The suspense is so intense that you could slice through it like a warm spoon in ice cream. So what is this all about? What is the project that they're striving towards? The goal of this project is to build the sacred tent. In the translation that we read, it said that they were building the sanctuary. In the Good News translation, it says that they're building the sacred tent. In other translations, it says that they're building the tabernacle. I went with the Good News translation because that's the one that we have in our pews. And so you already know that it's a sanctuary or a tabernacle. It's a sacred tent. But it's not just any old sacred tent. The sacred tent is more properly known as the tabernacle. And maybe you're wondering, what is the tabernacle? Well, the tabernacle is the sacred tent. And where's the sacred tent? Well, the sacred tent is the tabernacle. It was the tabernacle. The tabernacle is a sacred tent. And we could just keep on going. But I don't want to escape the doom spiral of sacred tabernacle. So let's agree that the tabernacle, sacred tent, is the place where God would be present with his people. The tabernacle, the sanctuary, the sacred tent is the place where God is present with his people. God is instructing and empowering the Israelites to build a place where he can dwell amongst them. It was a place of God's presence, and as well as that, it was a place of worship. It was a place where Moses would go to meet and speak with God. And it's also a place where sacrifices and offerings would be made. So it's a pretty important building project. We could probably agree. And you can see why they needed divine inspiration. You can see why they needed divinely inspired craftswomen and craftsmen to complete this construction. And there's plenty much more that we could say about the tabernacle, and I would encourage you, maybe when you get home, go on YouTube and Google what is the tabernacle, and then you can have a video tour of the tabernacle. Some of them are quite cool. I don't know, you might be interested in that, you might not. There's a lot of chat about the tabernacle in some of the commentaries, and there's a lot of information about the tabernacle in the book of Exodus. And I'll be totally honest, not all of it is very interesting. A lot of it is design this ornament. This is how you make this robe. This is the dimensions of this particular tent. And so that's a kind of fascinating exercise if you like to recreate that kind of stuff, but it's not the most spiritually formative. So you'll be pleased to know that we're going to move on a little bit from the what of the tabernacle, and I will leave you to your own devices later to find out what the tabernacle is and what it looked like. We've touched on the theme of God's presence multiple times in this series, and we will touch on the theme of God's presence next week in our final sermon about Exodus after the Exodus. And so because of all of that, we're going to move on from the what of the tabernacle, and instead we're going to have a look at where. God and his people, they're building a sacred tent. Where are they going to put it? Where is this tent going to go? And like all good tents, the tabernacle is mobile. The tabernacle can be moved. A vital aspect of the tabernacle's design is that it had these carrying poles. poles which enabled God's people to move God's house wherever it needed to go. I guess it's kind of like an ancient equivalent of a caravan or something like that. Had these carrying poles, and even once it found a more permanent resting place in Jerusalem, the carrying poles still had to stay in place. Now, the fact that the tabernacle, the sacred tent, is portable, it clearly serves a very practical purpose. Israel are a people who are on the move. They are wandering through the wilderness in search of a promised land. If God is going to go with them, as he said he's going to go with them, then the place of his presence cannot be one fixed single abode. But the mobile nature of the sacred tent, it also serves a theological purpose. It reminds us that God cannot be controlled. We do not get to decide on one certain set place where God will be, and we don't then get to expect that we can meet him there whenever we fancy a special God moment. It's true that if we seek God, we will find him. It's true that if we draw near to God, then he will draw near to us. But it's also true that God is not our butler. God is not at our beck and call. We enjoy a dynamic, personal relationship with a living and active God. And whilst we're involved in the making and the moving of the tabernacle, it is God who decides how he'll be present. So I think this makes it all the more interesting, all the more remarkable, that the tabernacle was going to be set up in the very middle of the Israelites' camp. I don't know if you've ever been camping. I don't know if you've ever struggled with a tent in the wind and the rain. And if that is you, and I'm so sorry for you, some people like camping. I don't understand why. You might be thinking, if you struggle with a tent in the wind and the rain, that it makes a lot of practical sense to put the sacred tent in the middle of the camp, because then all of the buildings, all of the other things around it can shield it from the wind, and they can stop the guy ropes and the carrying poles from flailing everywhere and blowing all over the place. And for a sacred tent, that's probably a sensible idea, to put it somewhere where the wind isn't going to stop you from being able to put it up properly. In my experience, assembling a tent in the wind and in the rain, it's never a holy experience, and it rarely prepares me well for worship. You're probably also right, though, in thinking that there is a more meaningful reason for the tent being in the middle of the camp. With the sacred tent in the middle of the camp, it meant that God was at the center of Israel's life. It meant that God was at the very heart of the people of Israel. God was at the center of his people, both metaphorically, spiritually, and now literally, with the sacred tent. Our God is not a God who rules from above. He is not a distant, impersonal, uninterested deity. Our God is the God who chooses to live at the very center of his people, in the middle of their camp, to rule from within our midst. Ours is the God who is with his people, for the long haul through the wilderness. I think that few passages sum this up better than John 1:14, which describes how Jesus took on flesh and he tabernacled amongst us. Jesus is the perfect expression of a mobile and present God living amongst us. God is with us. God is for us. God's presence is the beating heart of his people. If God does not go with us, what will make us different from any other people? And we could rejoice about this fact forever. We could talk about God being in our midst for such a long time that if we did, then we would never get to the end of the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how of this Exodus building project. And so we'll move on, and we're going to have a look at the when. Of when is this due to take place? When is this building project going to happen? And I know what you're thinking, because sometimes it just feels so pointless to ask a time-based question about a construction project. Because they never start on time, they never finish on time, they always take longer than they expected to, and no one's ever honest about it. Like, I ask the builder, how long will it take to build the house? He'll say like 3 years, even though he knows it's going to take 5 years. Well, you can breathe a sigh of relief, Because we're not going to ask a date-based when this building project is going to happen. We're going to ask a story-based when does this building project happen. When does the building of the tabernacle take place in the story of God's people? And the first key point here is that the building project takes place in the book of Exodus after the event of the Exodus. God's building project begins only after he has let his people go. One of the overarching narratives of the whole book of Exodus is this movement of God's people from slavery to service. They move from slavery under Pharaoh to service of the living God. They move from work to worship. For Israel, the book of Exodus, it starts with enforced construction under Pharaoh. It starts with them being told, and increasingly oppressive conditions, to build these vanity projects for the Egyptian people. And it ends with the people of Israel overflowing in offerings for a building project with God. We might think, as modern London dwellers, that the construction of a sacred tent is like a little bit mundane. It doesn't really matter that much. But when we see it in that context of the whole story of Israel, from work to worship, we can see that this is a crowning moment in the story of Israel's people. They get to work freely with God. The importance of the tabernacle is also underlined by the fact that the Bible passage that we read this morning, it was 13 verses. Those are 13 verses amongst 13 chapters in Exodus about the tabernacle. 13 chapters in the book of Exodus are devoted to the construction of the tabernacle. I don't think your faces appreciate how incredibly vast that is. 13 chapters. If you've ever tried to read the whole Bible from the first page to the last page, I think it must be so tough when you get to these tabernacle sections, because you've enjoyed the cycles of Genesis. You have surfed the waves of Israel's escape from Egypt. And then all of a sudden you have to crash back down to earth as you're exposed to chapter after chapter after chapter of excruciating detail about the design of a tent and everything to go in it. And then it gets worse, because just as you're scrambling around in the froth of those waves that have chucked you onto the shore, and just as you're catching your breath with the interruption of the golden calf incident, and just when you're thinking, oh, phew, finally a little bit of narrative amidst all the laws and the design, just as you think you might be safe, another tidal wave of tabernacle design smashes on top of you. It bowls you over as you're forced to read the whole thing over and over again. Almost 1/3 of the book of Exodus is devoted to the tabernacle, to the construction of the tabernacle. Such a huge mass of material suggests that it probably might be a little bit significant. And it is. It signifies that God desires to dwell with his people. Even if it's significant, it's still not exactly interesting. And if you're looking for someone to blame for why there's a repetition of the tabernacle stuff twice, then you can blame the golden calf. You can blame a lot of things on the golden calf. The golden calf has got a lot to answer for in the book of Exodus. The tabernacle instructions, they occur twice, once before the golden calf incident and once more afterwards. And how frustrating is that we have to read it 2 times? But also, it is incredibly important. It's important because the repetition shows that God has not given up on his people. The God who first called them to make a sacred tent so that he could dwell with them still wants them to make a sacred tent and dwell with them after they have made a golden calf. It shows that God will forgive them and God will go with them. And even though they've committed the most horrendous idolatry and made their own God, literally as Moses is up there getting the commands which say, don't make another God, God still intends to go ahead with his building projects. God still intends to go with his people. And we can perhaps now turn to the why. Why is God going ahead with this building project in the first place? Why do we have to build it? Why are there 13 chapters dedicated to it? And the obvious answer, as we've just alluded to, is so that God can be present with his people. God promised his presence, and now God initiates a building project that can accommodate his presence. Sorted. Why answer is sorted. If you like, you can zone out for a minute or two until our final question. Equally, if you don't want to zone out, we can consider another additional, slightly deeper answer, and it's an answer which taps into a central current of the biblical story, and that answer is recreation. At the very beginning of the Bible, in the Garden of Eden, God strolls with Adam and Eve, and they enjoy having a natter in the cool afternoon breeze. And if that sounds like paradise to you, strolling with God in a cool afternoon breeze, and it certainly sounded like paradise to me as I was sat typing away, sweating over my laptop writing this sermon. If it sounds like paradise, that's because it probably was paradise. And it is a kind of paradise that we can look forward to in the future. As we read in Revelation, that God will make his home among mortals. God will dwell with us, and God will be with us. We will be his people, and he will be our God, and God himself will be with us. In the beginning, we have God strolling with his people. At the end, we have God probably still strolling with his people. I don't know, some other more fun, dancing with his people. Let's go with that. But currently, we're living in an in-between period. We're living in between these two paradises. And so also were the Israelites way back in the book of Exodus. We're in a stage, and so were they. We're in a stage where the new creation is both sort of here, to which we say, thank you, Jesus. And it's a stage where new creation is still sort of loading. We're still waiting for it to kind of properly download the new creation, and to which we say, come Lord Jesus. We're in, and Israel was in, the recreation process. And this is why God undertook the Sacred Tent project. Constructing the tabernacle is a recreative act. It recreates a mini world in the midst of a sin-stained creation where God reigns once again. The tabernacle is an oasis of order against the raging chaos of the wilderness. The tabernacle is God's presence on earth in creation, and it represents God on the move. It's a mobile tent. God is not content to stay in that tent forever. From this one tabernacle-sized slice of heaven, God intends to embrace all of creation with redemption and love and grace. God embarks on this wilderness building project so that he can be present with his people. And as God is present and as God partners with his people, they and we become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, sharing God's blessing and glory, carrying God's presence, mediating God's presence throughout all of the rest of creation. That is why God designs this sacred tent. It's a recreative act. First step in his mission to bring his blessing, his presence, his glory, his holiness back to all of creation. And so, if you chose to zone out for the second part of the why, you can zone back in now if you'd like to, because we have arrived at the big final remaining question, which is how. How is this going to happen? And the book of Exodus, it shows us that there are two ways to build things. There is a way to build things. There's a way not to build things. We have the way of the sacred tent, and we have the way of the golden calf. You probably don't need me to tell you which one is better. The golden calf was made at the people's initiative, with little planning, in a speedy process, with gold commanded by Aaron. The golden calf was a visible idol, which was under the people's control, and it was an impersonal object. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty lame. We compare it with the way of the sacred tent. The tabernacle was rooted in God's initiative. God designs this. God started this. It was made with intricate planning, 13 chapters detailing how it's to be made, in a careful construction process with a superabundance of offerings from all of the people. The tabernacle housed the mysterious presence and safeguarded the dazzling holiness of an active and personal God. What a difference there is in these two ways. How much better when the people of God participate in surrender and obedience to what God is doing, rather than attempting things on our own terms. And this is the part of our passage this morning which astonishes me the most. It's right at the end, and it's with this part that we're also going to end. It's the part where Bezalel, Aholiab, all of the other skilled workers, they're busy creating away, crafting away, making everything that's needed for the sacred tent, just as the Lord has commanded. And it's great, but then they encounter a problem. And then you think, oh no, a problem. But this isn't any problem, because this is a wonderful, glorious, unbelievable problem to encounter. I mean, we said that there are 3 sets of characters in the passage, and this is where we find the 3rd set of characters, everyone else. This is when they really have their time to shine. Because everyone else, all of the rest of the people who are not very good at art, who can only draw stick people, who weren't very artsy, they weren't very construction-y, they have been busy bringing offerings for the construction of the tabernacle. They have been bringing their offerings so that there were enough resources for the sacred tent to be built. Halfway through the construction, the skilled workers, they have to go to Moses and they have to tell him that the people are bringing more than is needed for the work which the Lord commanded. And Moses then has to go to the people, by the way, who are in the middle of a wilderness, at the bottom of a mountain, the people who have just escaped slavery in Egypt, the people who are notorious for their incessant whining and stubbornness. And Moses has to go and ask them, these people, to stop being so generous. You just can't believe it, that what they have already offered is way more than enough to finish the work. There is an abundance of offerings. There is an abundance of generosity. Their obedience is exuberant. I find this astonishing, and I find it challenging. The Israelites, they respond to God's call. They respond to God's building project with obedience, with willing hearts, with abundant generosity. And we have been asking the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how of Israel's wilderness building project. And there are 2 questions which I think that the building project can ask back to us. These questions are: where is God calling us to partner with him? We wrote down our gifts. How is God calling you to use them? Is there a part in your life where God is calling you to step out in faith? Is there somewhere you're already stepping out in faith and you just need to call on God for more, for help, for strength, for patience? And the second question: does God rule at the center of our lives? Is God's presence in our midst, right in the middle? Is he the beating heart of our existence as a people of God? And we're going to have 2 or 3 minutes of prayerful, silent reflection before I hand over to Becky. The questions will stay on the screen.